So today I'm going to be working on the items update. So let's get working on that.
So I've went ahead and planned out most of the item system's architecture. So there's going to be an inventory manager that keeps track of which inventories are open and also the item that you're holding and the item that's in your offhand. And then that's going to communicate with item slots and slot groups. So a slot group is basically like a mini inventory, like a chest that you might open or like your hotbar, and then an item slot is in charge of managing items and switching items between slots and that kind of thing. Um, each of these item slots has an artifact item data and it also has item data. So the artifact item basically shows how to use it, what happens when they activate their primary use, what happens when they activate their secondary use, what happens when they start holding it, stop holding it, drop it, that kind of thing. These are basically going to be resources. And then the item data itself is going to be probably also a resource that basically keeps track of how many of the items in their stack, the health of the item that could be used for durability, but for most items it's just gonna have one health. What happens when the item breaks or loses health? What happens then? And then also enchantments because this is going to be a magical game. So like how light or dark is the enchantment? What's its speed effect? And these are some basic effects that I think we might have, and we'll see what it is. And there's also contact because if two magical items contact each other, for example, one super dark and one super light, they should both break or at least suffer because light stuff isn't supposed to hit dark stuff without breaking. So that's just a general idea of the architecture that I have right now. And this is it in ClickUp. And I've done another kind of system before that's just basically one class. It didn't work very well, so I'm hopeful that this will work a lot better and a lot more smoothly.
So the last clip was from yesterday, and I spent 9 hours or so implementing that as best as I could. And I've quickly made a map here of um, how everything works so far. Um, I felt that the one that I made in my last devlog was a little bit too crowded, so I've reorganized it so it's easier for me to see what's going on, and hopefully this gives you an idea of what's happening a little bit more clearly too. And this down here is the new system that I've made. This is the input, or not the input, but the item system and the inventory system. Um, just to walk you guys through this, the most thing basically is this item data up here, and it's extended by magical item data, which just has the item data has an identifier or flag that says is magical, and so it's easy to access the magical data if you need it. This is a property of an artifact item, which has a bunch of functions that describe its behavior in different parts of the world. And artifact item gets talks to use data, and use data is defined over here. It basically comes from Godot right now, but then I'm also going to make a player manager that it can access. And use data is basically just referenced in functions. For example, if you use a primary use and you want to maybe spawn a bullet where the player's eyes are, you need to know where the player's eyes are, so that's why you need this use data. The artifact item is referenced by an item slot, which is basically just an inventory slot, and it is referenced by a slot group, and that slot group is referenced by the inventory manager. And also the item slot is referenced by, or references drag data. And the idea is that I'm using the Godot's drag and drop. And so the drag data is just an object for me to structure that dragging and dropping data around. And then there's also a drop catcher in the very background that's just a text, like if you drop data outside of your inventory or even off screen, the drop catcher says, hey, we need to either drop this item, or hey, you're trying to drop it outside of your outside the game, and we need to rubber band that back to where it was before. Um, and then the inventory manager basically just keeps track of all the open slots or slot groups. Um, and you can basically just tell it to open an inventory or close an inventory. So at runtime right now, I'm saying open your hotbar and open your offhand and open your consumables bar and that kind of thing. And then I have right now just a simple button set up to open your actual inventory. And both of these work with the input manager. So um, for obviously like triggering that primary use or triggering a secondary use or that kind of thing. And there's some other things that I've made here, but let me just run it real quick to give you guys an idea. Um, so right now you can walk around. I'm using arrow keys right now because my scroll wheel is broken, but I can scroll through the items on my hotbar if you see that in the lower left there. Um, and that's all placeholder art right now, but if I open my inventory, you can see I can drag and drop data around. Um, and this is bringing that into play. I can put a potion up there. I can stack data, so I can stack items. For example, woods here stacks to 100, so I can try to put 20 more wood on it, and it doesn't let me do that. I can stack it to 60 though, and I can stack this to 100. Um, Gold stacks to 10 like that. I had a problem where if you pick up an item and put it in the same spot that you picked it up from, there was an issue there where it just gave you, it deleted the item, and I fixed that. Dropping the item triggers the items dropped function, which can be customized in whatever way you need it to be. If you pick up an item and you take it off screen, it puts it back where it was. But if you keep the item and you haven't dropped it off screen, then if you try to put it back somewhere, it just it handles it correctly and it moves it to where you need it to be. And I also have a system for using. So if I come out of my screen here and I select my potion and I push right click for the primary use, it drinks it. And I just have that printing to the screen right now, so we can see that we drank the potion twice. This is printing out when we start holding it and we stop holding an item. So that's all handled correctly. And then also, I have these 4 slots up here. These 4 slots are triggered by special keys. So right now, this one is going to be, I believe, 7, or it might be 8. I think this one will be 8. So if I go over here and I push 8, it'll drink that potion. And again, that just gets printed out to the screen right now, but that can be customized later. And right now I have a very basic system for tooltips. It's just putting text on screen right now. I'm going to expand on that in just a second, if all goes according to plan. But that's where it is right now. And the code, it honestly wasn't that bad. I've made systems like this before, and it was a lot harder for me in the past, but I guess the second time doing it's just a lot easier. But for example, this is the item slots scene. This is probably the hardest part of it. So yeah, the quantity label, the item sprite. This is the cooldown indicator, which I just change its scale. So over here, scale, you can bring it up and you bring it down. But it's not pretty simple, which is good. And then obviously you have the selected item, which this is just changing its colors alpha. So it's just highlighting it if you get selected. And then obviously this is all using a theme. So we can change what we want it to be. Obviously this theme, we can change whatever we want the texture of the background of the slot to be, but I don't have a texture for that yet. It's all just placeholder right now. But all of that can be figured out later, I guess. For now, I'm just worried about the actual system, the guts of it working. And now I'm going to try to work on, I think what I want to work on most is this player manager and make sure that this whole thing works. I expect there to be a cyclic reference because player or use data is using players manager is using the inventory manager, and inventory manager is using slot group is using item slot is using artifact item is using use data, which is again using the inventory manager. So I think this is going to give me a cyclic reference error, and if it does, I'm going to have to, I guess I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. But I did a quick test and it didn't. So I'm hopeful, but we'll see. So I'm going to work on this, and I'll see you in a bit. So I've been doing some work with the player manager and use data, and I've discovered something kind of interesting. Um, I thought that there would be a cyclic reference, a circular reference, because use data is. I mean, if you follow these arrows, you can see that it goes this way, right? But then it's coming right back up to inventory manager and going this way again. So it should be cyclic, and in most languages it would be, but in Godot, it's not, and I'll tell you why. And I think this is kind of interesting, and this makes me love Godot a lot more actually. Um, but uh, I have auto-loaded use data. So this is just a normal node with a class name of use data, and it's been auto-loaded, so it starts at runtime right here, auto-loaded as current use data CUD. Um, and what I'm able to do is, even though it's referencing artifact item, which is a class, it's this class right here, um, even though it's referencing artifact item can still reference it. You see I'm using CUD right here. And it can't reference uh, the class use data. Like if I say bar X and I say it is a use data, this isn't going to work, and you see that it gives that error. But I can use CUD, which is an instance of use data. And I thought that was really interesting. And the same applies for a lot of things. So, um, so long as you auto load a type, you don't have to worry about getting that type. You don't have to worry about cyclic references with it, so long as you reference an instance of it instead of the type itself. The one downside is you don't get type hints. For example, I'm using CUD get player here, referring to this function, but it doesn't. It doesn't have any code completion for it. So if I say cud dot get player, and you can see it doesn't help me with it. But that's a small price to pay for getting away with a cyclic reference here. And this is, I think I'm finally understanding the real power of a dynamically typed language, um, because I'm able to reference a class, an instance of a class, without referencing the class itself. And that's really powerful. I mean, you can see that it does work. If I start holding something, um, it'll print out that I started holding it at the player's location here. Um, and that is proof that we are, in fact, getting the player from our current use data. Um, so that's interesting, and I thought I would share that with you guys. Um, but I have a much greater appreciation for the Godot language now than I did before, because this is really, really cool, and I did not know that this was possible until now. So there you go, that's my quick thing that I learned. And in terms of actually being able to use it, it's almost done. So artifact item here has access to everything that's auto-loaded, so I don't really need to have a current use data, but at the same time, I feel like kind of like a door for items to interact with the world would be a good thing, just to help organization. All of the items interacting with the world, all of those interactions have to go through this use data. I think that would be useful for separation um, and kind of organization in the code. So I'm going to keep it. But in terms of progress, it's really just done because um, all of these, if I want to add a functionality to an item, if I need more information than this, I'll just make another function in use data to get it. And the cost of this is very minimal. The cost of doing it this way, performance-wise, is very, very minimal. So I'm okay with doing this. And that about wraps up in terms of functionality, data like items. That wraps up all of the items functionality. There's one more thing that I want to do though. For example, right now, if I open my oh, and just to test this, I made made the potion teleport you upwards, and then it replaces the potion with gold. So it also has access to the inventory. So watch this. Teleports me up, but then I also get the gold item down here, which is proof to me that I can access the inventory. So that is I guess the progress right now. The one downside though is this. The tooltips are not good at all. So I'm going to do some work on that and try to fix that. And that's going to be the next thing I do. And when that's done, I'm going to make some functions for kind of querying the inventory, asking what items are in the inventory, if there are any slots that are open, and that kind of thing. Um, and then if that all works, then I'm going to probably implement something so I can quick move between, maybe like a shift click, and it'll quick move between the inventory and the hotbar. Or maybe if you have a chest open, it'll quick move between the inventory and the chest, or anything like that. So I'm going to get to work on those, and I will be back in a bit. So it's been a few days since the last clip, and that is because as soon as I started working on um, fixing a bunch of the issues that I was talking about before, like quick moving and that kind of thing, I realized that the system that I had right now was not very expandable at all, and that was largely because I was using Godot's built-in drag and drop, which is not designed, as far as I can tell, to be used in an inventory system. It's more like dragging and dropping a file, or that kind of thing. That's what it's more geared towards. And so I had to spend some time basically destroying what I had, and restarting to use my own drag and drop system. Not the same as the visual drag and drop that I made before, um, because that one was more geared towards dragging something across the screen. Not I didn't use this system, but I built my own separate system again, um, mouse chasers. So um, just displaying a preview wherever the mouse is, that can contain drag data, and so that's what I used this time. I basically played around with Minecraft's inventory system and Stardew Valley's inventory system, trying to piece together how they worked, and then I built mine around what I learned from that. So I spent a long time rebuilding what I had, and it was a lot smoother. The previous system, it took like 9 hours to build with Godot's drag and drop. This system though took maybe 4 hours, um, and it was a lot smoother. I didn't delete everything, but there was a lot of things that had to be changed. So this is what it was before, over here, and this is what it is now. So uh, I guess I'll just show you what I have. Actually, would be a good way of catching you up. Um, so I'll run it. Um, right now, every item in the inventory is just being randomly assigned. Um, but you can pick up items and move them. You can pick up um, one of an item and move it. So I can pick up some wood here, um, like that. You can take half, so I can take half of the wood here, like that. I can I can replace one. So if I'm hovering over something and I want to put only one down, I can do that. So I can put one down. I can put more down. That kind of thing. I can drop an item. Right now it's just printing to the screen, so if I take some of this gold and drop it, it'll say I dropped and then the ID of the item, but that can be changed later. Um, and then what else? You can still use items. So if I hold the potion and I drink it, that happens. Um, and then I also added functionality for quick moving, so I can quick move my wood around like so. Um, and then I can also quick move all, so I can quick move all my wood, move all my gold. How about all the potions? Like so. Uh, so that's where I am now. It's a lot better than the previous system. you can see that it slowly like ramps up speed. We're picking up one and putting down one. Um, and that's basically all the progress that I've made. Um, the next step here is to look into um, making the items actually do something. So now that I have the item framework, actually programming what an axe does when you swing the axe, um, and that kind of thing. So that's the next step to this, is actually implementing the system. This is all placeholder right now. The artist placeholder. The functionality is just testing. Um, hopefully by the end of it, we'll be doing more than just printing to the console. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And I'll show you briefly how it works, um, so that you have an idea of it in case you're doing this yourself. This would be my third iteration of um, just delete everything and start over. So hopefully, if I walk you through this, you won't have to make as many of those mistakes that I made. Um, so first, I guess we can go through what an item is. So the item data and the magic item data for an artifact, using current use data to actually implement, primary use or start holding or that kind of thing. And then this is kept track of by an item tracker. That way, if you drink, like let's say you have 2 stacks of potions, if you drink, it used to be that if you drank a one potion from one stack, only that stack of potions would be on cooldown, but you could still drink from the other stack. Now, the entire thing will be on cooldown, which means, like in Fortnite, there was a glitch where you could switch between 2 shotguns, and if the time it took to pull out a gun was faster than the cooldown of shooting a gun, you would just swap back and forth between 2 guns really quickly. You can't do that anymore. It still has the cooldown. Um, so there's a preemptive defense against that. Um, and then you have your player manager, which communicates to all things about the player, the player's body, the player's inventory, all of that. And then you have that communicating to current use data, which is what we're using over here, obviously. And then I've also made a mouse chaser, which basically you can give it something a mouse, or you can give a mouse chaser a cat, and the cat will chase around the mouse on screen. Which basically all that's doing is it's teleporting whatever node you put on it to the location of the mouse. Um, and then we have the actual guts of the inventory system over here. So obviously it uses the artifact items in an item slot, and the item slot in a slot group, and the slot group of an inventory manager, which are all getting inputs from the input manager. And then the item slot is using mouse chasers. It's also using previews and drag data. And that's about all in terms of how it works. Slot groups, you can query a slot group, so you can say, how much stone do you have in your inventory? You can say how many slots of stone do you have, and that kind of thing. And that's how quick moving works. Actually, it queries, hey, if you want to quick move all your stone, it says, hey, I want the slot group to receive this much, and then it queries for how much stone do you have of stone and that kind of thing. So you can do all of that. So the one thing that I haven't done is I haven't made um, a tooltip system. And the reason why is because I think instead of, if you hover over it, it kind of pops up a panel. Like if I hover over this potion, it pops up a panel here. Instead of doing that, I'm just going to have a dedicated section of the inventory, like a small panel or whatever, to display tooltips. This is just like the item inventory system, not actually the full item system, because obviously, or the full inventory, because once we get to that point, there's going to be, a moderate crafting station in your inventory and that kind of thing. So I'll have tooltip stuff in that implementation. For right now, I'm just not going to have tooltips, but they are displaying tooltips. So if I go to the item slot over here and I go to this, so there is a signal for request show tooltip, and basically what the actual inventory will do is just connect to the signal and say, hey, if you're requesting to show a tooltip, go figure out what that tooltip, what the tooltip is for the item that you're selecting, and then display that in the actual inventory. So the framework for implementing this is there, but I'm going to wait to do the full thing until I have the full inventory. There'll probably be like a panel right here or something to show what that is, because I plan on having longer tooltips to display, okay, you're holding a potion. What exactly are the effects of this potion? How much light energy is in it? How much dark energy is in it? That kind of thing. So that is my approach to that. But that is, um, but that is, I guess, the end of the item system. There's more things to do. For example, um, if you have a bow, um, I want it to not, because a bow is going to only stack to one. You're not going to have a stack of bows. You're going to have one bow. Um, so instead of displaying the quantity of the item, it's going to display the quantity of the ammo that you have. Um, but I'm gonna wait and add that functionality until I have an actual bow in the game. I don't think it makes much sense to make that framework now before I can even think about using it. So um, that's my philosophy with that. So the next steps for what I'm going to do next is actually I'm going to um, make the entity system. So dealing with things like health and defense and dying and spawning, and all of that stuff for the player, but also for things like trees. What happens when you chop down a tree? What happens when um, you break a rock? All of these kinds of things. And then once I have that done, I'm kind of going to gradually add in items that can interact with those. So I'll add probably an axe, maybe a sword. And then after I have those, I'll start to get into bows and guns and that kind of thing. And we'll see what happens from there. But that's where we are right now. A lot of progress. This system took me a lot longer than I had hoped. Probably because, against my better judgment, I tried to get the cheap way out and use Godot's drag and drop system. It was a lot more smooth after I made my own. So I recommend you guys make your own. Don't follow the tutorials using Godot's drag and drop. Um, that's my advice anyway. And with that, I will. Oh, actually, I do want to show one other thing, because there was one thing that the other drag and drop system did quite nicely. This system, if you take your mouse off screen and you bring it back on screen, um, everything is fine. If you take it off screen and you drop, instead of rubber banding it back to where it was before, it just drops it. So you see that I've dropped that wood now. It's printed to the console. Um, so I mean that's not a bad thing, but it's just a difference between systems. Um, so there you go. And I could change it if I wanted to, but for now, that's all that I need for this system. Um, and I will see you again once I'm done working on the entity system. That's all for now, guys. Thanks for watching.